question. What do these beings, I assume that means the Ascended Masters, say about soul loss as described in shamanism? The soul, meaning the aspect of the continuous self which continues incarnating, can get fractured or shattered as traditional medicine people see it. The soul can also have aspects of itself shear off during traumas, parts which go hide in the astral plane. My experiences with shamanic practitioners doing soul retrieval, which I didn't necessarily expect to work, as well as my experiences with soul-body fusion, a more modern practice from Jonette Crowley, of bringing in one's much higher dimensional soul essence, support the reality of these concepts. So I'm wondering how that perception fits with their cosmology. Well, the Ascended Masters have previously talked about soul division, soul fracturing, and a need for soul retrieval. They started talking about this in the Summit Lighthouse, I think it was in the early 1990s. And many people, myself included, in the Summit Lighthouse practiced this. Some used the inner child workbooks and the concept of the inner child. Others used various forms of therapy. I am not personally experienced what they do in shamanism. I haven't used that. I have used hypnotherapy, EMDR, and other tools. So, but it's a very valid concept, and the Ascended Masters have, in the early years when I started working with them, they were talking about it as well. But what has happened since then is that the Masters have now given these deeper teachings that when we experience, for example, trauma, we create these subconscious selves that reside in the subconscious mind. And this is what you can call the psyche or the soul. Because as also explained, we have these 4 levels of the mind: the identity, mental, emotional, and the purely physical. And what we have in our emotional, mental, and identity minds, we take with us when we reincarnate. So this is what most people call the soul, or the psyche. And the interesting thing about this new teaching about the subconscious selves is that, to me at least, having studied many of these other modalities, it gave me some tools that I thought were very profound to work with. Because the idea of a subconscious self is that it's based on an illusion. And once we come to see the illusion, we have, in a sense, separated ourselves from the illusion. I explained in many of my videos that the core of our being is the conscious you, and it's seeing through the self. It's experiencing the world through the self. And that's why we often react. Once we created a self based on a certain reaction, we continue to repeat that reaction whenever we encounter a similar situation. And it's only when we come to see it, as the conscious you becomes conscious, that, oh, there is this pattern in my 4 lower bodies, but it's not me. I haven't become the pattern. I created it because I came to believe in an illusion. But now that I see the illusion, I, of course, can let the illusion go, and I can let the self die. And I can invoke spiritual light to consume the energies accumulated in the self. So back to the question of soul retrieval or soul fracturing, the way I see it now is that what they call a soul part is actually one of these subconscious selves. And you can have, for example, let's say you had a very traumatic situation in a past life where you were killed or tortured, and there could be, you could have created a subconscious self to try and deal with that situation, and it might have become attached somewhere, whether it's, as the questioner says, the astral plane, which is part of the emotional realm. But a soul part can also be attached to a physical location. So the way I would look at it is that what has happened is that in the past, some of these subconscious selves have been split off from our 4 lower bodies. And this means that they're still pulling on us, but we can't resolve them as long as they are that far away, because it's difficult to look at them, to see them. So that's why it can be very valuable to use various techniques for what they call soul retrieval. I mean, to me, it doesn't matter did you call it something else. I think the effect of soul retrieval is to retrieve these subconscious selves, pull them back so you can look at them, come to see their unreality, and let them go. You're basically letting them die. I know they will talk about how we integrate this. I also know that in the inner child modality, for example, I talk about we need to integrate the inner child, but I also see the inner child as these subconscious selves we created in past lifetimes or even in our childhood to react to or to deal with difficult situations. So, you know, the Ascended Masters have given some very profound techniques in a book called Healing Your Spiritual Traumas. And Mother Mary, for example, has an exercise in there where you go into the subconscious and reconnect to a particular situation where you created a self. And this is something I have used myself. I know many people who have used it with good effect. And so that book, Healing Your Spiritual Traumas, might be something to look at if you're interested in this topic. And what I have found is that these techniques will actually allow you to even retrieve a lost self and dissolve it. So you don't have to call it back first. You can actually connect to it and dissolve it, and it's gone. But of course, if you find that these other techniques for soul retrieval work better for you, by all means use them. I'm not trying to say that, you know, one size fits all. So anyway, what I'm saying is that basically the Ascended Master teachings very much are in line with these soul retrieval. Now again, I don't know the shamanic teachings, so I don't know if they're totally in alignment with the Master's teachings, but the basic idea, only that today the Masters would, instead of a soul part, they would call it a separate self or a subconscious self. Because the idea is, you see, the idea from the Master's perspective is that it's not a matter of integrating, reintegrating these soul parts. It's a matter of dissolving the selves. Because let's say you were in a traumatic situation in the past and you created a subconscious self, or you had a soul part split off, whatever you want to call it, based on that trauma, then why would it help you to reintegrate that soul part? It just brings it closer so you are more caught up in the trauma. So the goal, of course, is to resolve the effect that the trauma has on you, and therefore essentially dissolve that soul part so the trauma isn't affecting you, which is what I call letting the self die. And so that's the way I would look at it, that the whole goal is, because as I've explained before, the goal is that the conscious you returns to its pure state, the pure state that it descended with. And that's why in Ascended Master teachings, the ultimate goal before you can ascend from Earth is actually to dissolve what most people call the soul or the psyche. Because this was created in reaction to Earth and in order to take embodiment on Earth. So it was created based on the current conditions on Earth, and when you ascend, you of course free yourself permanently from the conditions on Earth. You are transcending those conditions, and you can only do that if you don't have any attachment to it, where you can just let it all go, and you're standing there looking back at Earth and you realize there's nothing there for you, nothing that pulls you back.